Worry about, well, supply chains more broadly, and indeed how labor fits into all of it. President Biden will speak at the Port of LA tomorrow to highlight that his administration is trying to solve supply chain bottlenecks. Recent progress could hinge actually on the outcome of intense labor negotiations between shipping companies and West Coast dock workers, who handle almost 40% of U.S. imports. Joining us now to discuss all of this, Paul Brashier, VP of Drayage and Intermodal with ITS Logistics, which provides a variety of distribution services, including B2B, omni-channel, with direct-to-consumer. You help the likes of Amazon, Costco. Paul, do you think there will be a strike?
Right now, I don't think so. I mean, there's a media lockdown because of the rules that they have in place. The Biden administration's been a lot more proactive. And in 2012, where we had our last strike, there weren't a lot of folks proactively engaging all the parties. 2014, 15, there was a slowdown and not as many folks engaged proactively from the administration level. I think we learned a lot of stuff as well over the last 18 months, where just because of the sheer pain and that forced the administration to address a lot of things, we are now seeing them be a lot more engaged in this current environment. And another thing to throw out there too is over the last 18 months, a lot of shippers and BCOs started booking shipments to the East Coast, especially the Southeast and the Gulf. Mm-hmm. And by doing so, there's a little bit more competition in there, and you could see further erosion in for the West Coast by those other ports taking on that additional capacity.
All right. Well, we're all sort of keeping an eye on whether those labor negotiations end up being resolved before anything drastic. In the meantime, you're still dealing with a lot of disruptions from the COVID crisis and maybe from the trade war that preceded that, Paul. I'm curious as to right now what you're seeing on the ground here with the trucks being able to get in and out. What do wait times look like? And more importantly, what does compensation look like for a company like yourself right now? Do you have that pricing power to compensate yourselves for any of that additional hassle?
Well, right now, and this is why this is coming at such a bad time, we're finally dug out of the last, 18-month mess. And, I think rates are down 28% for containers coming from Trans-Pacific. Volumes are down 26% year over year. And that puts us about where things were in September of 2020. So right now, things are moving smooth, and people are finally, especially on the BCO side, they're able to take a breath and start planning for the future. On our end, anytime there's any issues, we absorb a lot of those costs from a trucking standpoint. We have to pop up yards. We have to add additional resources, that being chassis, yards, equipment to ground. Yeah. Containers, chassis moving. So on our end, it's challenging. Yeah.
Talk a little bit more about the chassis. So, I mean, we spent some time, Caroline and I, out at the port of Los Angeles last year, Long Beach, last year. And, I mean, the whole talk about the idea that all these chassis sort of sitting around, waiting to be picked up, the idea that there was this huge imbalance between the trucks coming in and what was going out here. Has that been resolved to any sort of meaningful degree?
Yeah, it has. I think what really drove that were empties. You had this influx of containers that came in, and they were full. And when you take those out of the port, if you didn't have receiving capacity, which a lot of folks didn't, and you have significant increase in volume, we had full and empty containers sitting on chassis for months. And let's say that something did get unloaded in a timely fashion. If the steamship lines aren't going through and sweeping those up and picking them up, then that chassis equipment is pretty much not able to be used. So we didn't really run into a driver issue. It was an equipment issue. Right. So what we had to pivot and do was actually pop up grounding yards and take those containers off so we could reuse those chassis. But where things stand right now, we're looking really good as long as we can continue to get those empties out. Yeah.
How then are sort of the inventory levels?
Inventory on containers or
basic goods as we think about sort of coming into return to school in the fall, some of the key holiday season for some of the big retailers towards the end of the year?
Yeah, so what we're seeing, and it kind of alluded, Target alluded to this earlier in the week, was that most shippers and BCOs are sitting on significant amounts of inventory, right? And you're seeing Target slash pricing and try to get that freight and those goods to the consumer and out of their DCs. And you're also seeing a lot of, not just our clients, but other folks cancel orders overseas because they have so much inventory. So with the consumer where they are right now, with inflation being so high and fuel prices, retailers are going to have to slash prices and burn through this inventory. So on this inbound container side, we're planning on this being very low for the rest of the year, but the domestic trucking side should see significant lift because of that, because this inventory needs to get out of these DCs. Yeah.
All right, Paul, really appreciate catching up with you. This is a topic that we cover a lot on this show, and we hope to catch up with you again soon, maybe as we get closer to that July 1st date. Paul Brashier there of ITS Logistics. A close look here, as we do almost every day, at the supply chain issues affecting this country and the world beyond. Coming up.